What's up, viewers, subscribers, and agents alike? It's your boy, Light Luciferian Prince, coming at you once again with another informative video in which we expound upon the things that are which less spoken upon, and we also touch bases on certain instances in which just to properly educate ourselves on what is today, what was yesterday, and what will be tomorrow. And that's the beautiful part about knowledge and research. It allows you to figure out your position, where you are in life today, or if you're unsure about where you're headed, where you can go. But knowledge is power, and application of it is powerful. But if you're watching this around children, please pause the video and please remove your children from the vicinity of your immediate area because my videos are not for children. Now we got that out of the way. Let's talk about something. Comes from one of my best books I love reading. I swear it's chock full of just uncensored information, like straight up. Like it's eye opener. I read it years ago and I want to expound upon it because I think it's very important. And the object it's called, the first chapter is the very most profound chapter that I love as far as it starting out like introductory for people who are basically coming to a realization of how this world is ran. This world is ran by specific intent and agenda of particular socio-political or economic or socio-religio groups that basically vie for control. And the vibe for control is over the population of people, as opposed to the actual way that it's supposed to work. See, we were indoctrinated from the public school system that government or anything particularly works for us, and we've been taught that. But the thing that people don't understand is that the older you get and the more you start to realize and research and do your studies on certain things, you'll see that that's totally not the truth. Not to mention, everything that you basically have been told conceptually has totally been distorted. It has been distorted greatly because they pretty much put certain information out there in the world. And because majority of people in society just accept something on face value, that's the reason why a great lie spreads very fast. And a truth will often have to take, quite a long time to get around the world, but the truth will always remain the same. So, let's talk about first chapter. Rich man, poor man, who's the thief? Hunger is not an unfavorable phenomenon like death and taxes. We are no longer living in the 17th century when Europe suffered shortages on the average of every 3 years and famine every 10. Today's world has all the physical resources and technical skills necessary to feed the present population of the planet, or even a much larger one. Unfortunately for the millions of people who go hungry, the problem is not a technical one, nor was it wholly in the 17th century for that matter. Wherever they live, rich people eat first. They eat a disproportionate amount of the food that is there, and only give the poor ones rarely rise and revolt against this most basic of oppressions, unless specifically told to eat cake. Hunger is not a scourge, but a scandal. The present world political and economic order might be compared to what is reigned over social class relations in the individual countries in the 19th century of Europe, which the third world now playing the role of the working classes. All the very horrors now playing in these societies, we look back upon with mingled disgust and incredulity had the equivalents and worst. In the Asian, African, and Latin American countries, where well over 500 million people are living in what the World Bank has called absolute poverty. And just as the property classes of yesteryear opposed every reform and predicted imminent economic disaster if 8-year-olds could no longer work in the mills, so today, the groups that profit from the poverty that keep people hungry and attempting to maintain the status quo between the rich and the poor worlds. 99% of the people reading these lines have next to nothing to do with world hunger crisis, even if they are well-fed Westerners, although this doesn't absolve any of us from acting like we shouldn't be against it. The other 1% know who they are. If you have read the newspapers all since the World Food Conference, has probably not been able to escape the charge that you eat too much meat and that you are therefore directly snatching life-giving grain from some poor baby in the Sahel. Yes and no, but mostly no. It is absolutely true that the developed industrialized countries, mostly Western, whether market economy or socialist, plus Japan and a handful of others, which we'll call DCS, consume a lot more food than the 3 continents of the so-called third world nations, which we would call UDCS, or underdeveloped countries. In general, they are neither less developed or developing. Their situation is frequently growing worse, and there is no reason to adopt polite, euphemistic initials to describe them. In recent years, the world has produced about 1,300 million tons of food and feed grains annually, and the DCS eat half, although they account for only about a quarter of the world's population. Their animals eat fully a quarter of all the grain, or as some journalists have undoubtedly already told you, because we get all our figures from the same United Nations documentation, the equivalent of total human consumption of China and India put together, some 1 to 3 billion people. If the Chinese, who raise about 4 times as many pigs as the Americans, collectively went mad tomorrow and began to feed their pigs on grain as Americans do, there will be very little grain left in the world for humans anyway. UDC people eat their grain directly as bread or other pastry. On average, although averages aren't really much use in UDCS countries, as you'll see, they consume about 506 pounds annually. Now, this is the year of 1969 to 1971. During the same period in the United States, people averaged around 1,760 pounds of grain intake, 9/10 in the form of meat, poultry, or dairy products. Figures just are slightly over or slower for certain Americans that's added 350 pounds of grain to his or her annual diet, which is why we have a problem with such obesity. Not to mention, this is one of the reasons why we have such a commercially based market of synthetic food as opposed to natural food. So, yes, people. It's a cheaper way to get more people to eat, to stay alive, just, well, alive enough, but to never really become nutritionally fortified, but passes off as in cost effective, but nonetheless unhealthy. But that's how they get down. Obviously, this America was not seriously malnourished in 1966, and this addition has been imperative. If you're eating too much meat and animal fat, this is a matter between you and your doctor. If millions of consumers are eating such a proportion of the world's cereal grains in this form, it is a matter between them, their government, and their economic agents. Their government primarily serves. It's also a matter in which the consumer generally has very little to say. Taking the individual meat eater to task for starving his brethren is about the same intellectual plane as, think of hungry children in India, darling, and finish your lovely peas and carrots. So please put your guilt, if you are harboring any, aside, which we will try to understand the structural nature of developing countries, agriculture, and how it relates to hunger. The United States is generally credited with having one of the world's most efficient food production machines. And there is plenty of evidence that it's attempting to generalize its own system in other developing countries and in the third world as well. It may be efficient, but it is also extremely costly. Didn't I tell you about that word, cost? That's all they worry about. If you still think of farming in terms of we plow the fields and scatter the good seed on the land, but it's fed and watered by God's almighty hand, you're barking up an entirely wrong tree. Agriculture, as practiced in the United States today, is hardly agricultural at all. This book was written back in the 60s, so it's 2021. So this lets you know that we definitely can actually go beyond all conjecture and know exactly what the words of this book is saying is very true. But farming itself inside the system has become almost identical. It occupies under 4% of the American incidental population on about 2,800,000 farms, which, as we can see today, has gradually decreased in number because the federal government even paid farmers to not farm. That's a fact. Not quite 4% of those farms produce half all the food that feeds over 96% for the farming population itself and provides millions of tons for export. Besides, 40 years ago, there were 6 to 8 million farms in America. The 4 million that have disappeared were, of course, small farms. Such inefficient producers have been increasingly replaced by super farmers. 1% of the United States feedlots, 1%, now raise 60% of the beef cattle, and then streamline producers reportedly grow 90% of all the lettuce in American salads. To give only 2 examples, fewer and fewer farmers are out in the fields and overall in straw hats. Wonder why. They are rather in corporate boardrooms in gray pinstripes and conservative ties. Many of them are farming only because of the tax advantages that the government offers them. In 1972, only 39% of U.S. farms with more than $40,000 turnover reported any profits at all. Profits are eaten up in costs, which are made up in other phases of business. One of the huge corporate farmers is Tenneco conglomerate. Its total operating revenue went over to the 5.5 billion mark in 1975. Now you inflate those numbers to today's cost, boy, it's a major grower of citrus fruits, grape, almonds, etc. This is just a tiny fraction of the business for the modern integrated company, and other divisions can supply tractors, fertilizers, and pesticides on the input end, and packaging, marketing, even ships to carry food on exports and the output end. Big processing companies like Del Monte and Minute Maid supply most of their own factories' needs from their own farms. Such farms need very little labor, but they are intensely dependent on manufactured inputs like machinery, irrigation systems, fertilizers, and the like. Let's stop right there. Overall, summarily, we've been told through the public food system that we have had this issue of world hunger. And when we understand that, we were taught in a naive sense that it was because of conditions or natural disasters or, war-torn countries, so forth. We never were really taught this from a capitalist standpoint. It never came to us from a capitalist standpoint. See, the capitalists indoctrinate the public by giving large subsidies and grants to educational organizations or administrative boards or the like to basically keep you ignorant to how capitalism really works. You see what I'm saying? And then they feed you false or misleading information even further to make you believe that somehow you are responsible for or can be responsible for that type of world hunger. I'm sure we probably heard people say it many times, as it was even said in the book. Don't you throw that food away. There's starving children all in the world. People. In colonialism, you have to understand colonialism, capitalism work hand in hand. If these entities are coming from different countries and they are subjugating these people regionally because they want to try to corner the economic system and keep those people from their sense of development and sustainability, that's how you cripple a country. He who controls the food controls the people. So you remove their ability to be able to provide for themselves, and this then makes them dependent, which means that now they can come set up a foreign government in their country's borders to basically subjugate those people, because in reality, the only reason why they're starving out the populations of people in certain countries is to steal their resources. That's the truth. It's not about world hunger. That is never a concern for a minority of people who have the means sufficiently to provide for themselves. However, socially, they want to try to influence us and convince us that as a social whole, this is the conditions and these are the problems. People, this is the way this system works. Okay? Like I said, in America, people have so much choice when it comes to the manufacture of goods and products that you can buy within the grocery store that we as a societal whole often make all the wrong ones for our dietary purposes. That's a fact. Some of the stuff that are even ingredient wise in certain products that we consume as a social whole are known to cause health problems, are known to cause effects. But big pharma, and because pharmaceutical companies are also partnered with production companies of food, trust me, do your research, you'll thank me later. But they don't care because it's all about profit over people. See, in a socialist-backed or ideologically social government, it's profit over people. It's never about what's good for you. See, they gave that bullshit food pyramid growing up in public food system, telling you to eat this many grains, these many dairies, and all this stuff, and didn't realize that we were consuming products that were GMO, genetically modified. So not only were we not getting adequate nutrition, we're also getting adequate education on what nutrition is either. And that's one reason why, as a society, there's so many people in this country who suffer from chronic conditions, which are based upon a dietary sense of what they consume, because you are what you eat. Now, the sole method is not to worry about the nutritional value for the people who own these corporations and own these farms. They don't care. They'll spray your food down with all types of pesticides and, package it, make it look all pretty and clean, make you believe nothing's wrong with it, it's perfectly fine. And in the end result, we consume more as a social whole, and that's why obesity is on the rise in this country. But remember, it's not about hunger. It's not about shortage of food in this country, because I can tell you there are a lot of chain stores and a lot of restaurants that we go to that throw away tons and tons of food yearly. So miss me with that whole people starving in this country. They're starving because it's about profit. If I can't make money off of it, I'm throw it away and just write it off as a tax write-off at the end of the year, and then I'll get that money back because I can't give it to other people. You know what I'm saying? I can't do that. And that's where a lot of the greed comes in, because it's corporate-backed greed. You see what I'm saying? So, what other industry does this help out? It also helps out the medical industry, because the stuff you eat is making you sick, which keeps them rich, because they need sick people, not well people. They don't pay these people big dollars to get things right. They pay them big dollars to keep things wrong. We have to understand the method behind the madness. The method behind the madness is really keeping things wrong, but letting them work well enough in order for us to stay wealthy and to keep robbing the people of their vitality and keeping ourselves healthy along the way, while the rest of the population dwindles into, just overall depravity, and mental health, drug abuse, you name it. All of these things are manufactured. And people could call it conspiracy theory all they want, but if you really look outside of current circumstances and things, you will really see things for what they really are. Now, if you choose to not see that, that's fine. That's your choice. But I was just having a conversation with somebody the other day. I said, well, David Rockefeller, I think he passed away, in 2016? This man had 7 heart transplants in his life. Now, we already know it was health-related, whatever case it be, but 7? The average person has to walk around with a pacemaker for a minimum of a few months to a few years before they can even find a donor. This man had 7? What was the separation of that or the average person's concern, what they call the poor man in the chapter, or the rich man? Now, we know how he probably got those hearts. We know that they didn't come how you think they came, because he wasn't on no donors list. You see what I'm saying? But that's beyond the message of this channel as of right now. But the poor man has to walk around with a medical debt, an artificial heart that can probably kill him, or whatever the case it be, or even in the midst of it, probably not even get a donor at all, and walk away with a big medical bill. I'm talking about huge, that, probably never even gets paid off throughout the course of your life. But this is how this country works. It's not about your health, your well-being. You're responsible for that. You can't blame it on the system. You can only educate yourself about it and live your life accordingly with what you know is best. But the system ain't gonna change. I tell you that right now. Not gonna change. Your food's gonna still stay the same. Whatever that little nonsense is that they serve you in these stores and restaurants or whatever, and they're gonna keep making a big profit off of it. So if you know their stance, then you have to take one too. So you take one for your longevity, and you just sidestep all the naysayers. That's all I can tell you. But at the beginning and the end of the day, the choice is yours. You know, you can cut this video off and enjoy your blue pill as lodged in your throat, or you can keep rocking and rolling and become determinative and worry about your own choices. That's your best bet. Other than that, I don't know what to tell you. You know, that's one reason why I stress and emphasize education so much about researching and looking up stuff for yourself. Because once you research things and start looking into things, you start to remove the fear concept from your mentality. And now you start to act in an objective sense, which is basically your response to what is presented before you, and not just accepting anything hook, line, and sinker that they wish to put before you. And you can make conscious choices. You know, see, this society has become so used to blaming things on things. You know, it's absolutely gross at this point, because what you should be blaming, you're not. And what you see as the source and cause, you don't wish to acknowledge that. It's a conspiracy. Sort of like Chicago and gun violence. People are like, well, look, just all this gun violence, it's black on black crime or Hispanic on Hispanic crime. First off, the manufacturer of those guns are all European. Glock, that comes from Austria, right? AK-47, that's Russian, correct? That's Asian, but you know what I mean. Travels all over the world. Smith & Wesson, American-based company, Remington, hello. But these people who would like to be the blame, the social blame be placed on them. They don't have trains, they don't have planes, they don't have buses to get that stuff, that hardware in there. All that stuff has to go by regulation. And if you know anything about federal firearms, it's regulated by the federal government. So, with that being said, the cause is what? You have to go to the source in order to know that. You see what I'm saying? You have to. And then you'll start acknowledging things for what they really are and understand that really isn't that more than just mass planned genocide. They don't have no problem with that stuff going on up there. They have no problem. None. They started out, the original gangsters in Chicago started out as what? People who came from Europe. With Prohibition, they got rich off of liquor, but they was dropping bodies too. But nobody wants to talk about that history. Mafia, so forth, so on, you name it. It's what it is. But it was all about profit as opposed to genocide. It's a big difference. Do your research on the definition. You'll see exactly what I'm saying is very true. But if you're one of the people who want to play the blame game, you're not looking through life. You ain't looking at life through the right lenses. That much I can tell you. You're just going to keep traipsing along, blaming, and never finding a solution to anything. Which is pretty much what they want you to do anyway. So that's your choice. That's fundamentally the simple fact. You're responsible for the choices you make and how you educate yourself to move accordingly to live a life that you want to live. Other than that, blame is for the lame. If this is the first time viewing this channel, please like and subscribe. Share the videos. This is what it is. So, lay that out there. Other than that, you can contact me via email for whatever case may be based upon my availability. In the next few coming weeks, universe willing, if I'm available, I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Other than that, I can only move based upon how we call time and how it basically is managed upon my behalf. So it is what it is. Stay tuned for next upload. Agents, you know what it is. I don't even have to waste time on y'all no more. So y'all really ain't too much of a use to yourself. So really just dead element. But you can be a ghost in the shell all you want. But y'all take care. Stay tuned.